Welcome everybody to the 2020 edition of the SIUC, Southern Illinois University Carbondale MFA in Creative Writing Gala. And we're going to be hearing tonight from most of our third year students who are graduating, and will be moving on with their terminal degrees in creative writing. And we have quite a panoply. I have got intros from almost everybody, and I have agreed to the stipulation that was made that if I was going to host this, I could not editorialize on people's intros, and so I'm just going to read what I have, unless you didn't send me an intro, in which case I'm just going to share what I know about you. And perhaps ironically, our first reader did not send me an intro, at least that I'm aware of. Let me find him here. Troy, I do not have an intro from you, do I?
You do not.
Okay, very good. Then I feel 100% justified in what I'm about to do to you. Mm-hmm. All right. No, it's not that bad, Troy. I wouldn't do anything real bad to you. But yeah, so as I was putting these together, I just went back through the most recent emails I had from everybody, and most of them were people's intros. So Troy Varvel has attached the first 30 pages of the book that he has revised and reordered to include pain. He just figured he'd touch base with me. Best, Troy. So. And let's spotlight Troy. If you can find Troy real quick and spotlight him, Ian. There he is.
All right, thank you for that introduction that I had coming. All right, I'm just gonna read a couple of poems. The first one is, I don't want to talk about my speech anymore. Every Thursday, Brandon punched me in the mouth. Don't say a word, he said as he stood over me, because after every one of his hits, either on the morning school bus or at recess, I fell, short and sharp like a crack in my voice. You've hurt worse, he said, until one day when he stepped on the bus and looked at me. My fist clenched and I punched myself in the mouth. So he wouldn't have to. I smiled blood at him, but he stared out the window all the way to school. At recess, so other boys wouldn't have to, I again punched myself in the mouth. My front teeth scratched into knuckles and felt like rusted barbs from the swing set chains stung into me. During those years around the schoolyard, Brandon would begin a joke with, a stutterer walks into a bar, and end with, he was served 4 beers. The real punchline was, well, you know, everyone has seen it before. The cracking cartilage sounded like pebbles spitting beneath my shoes as the boys ran away from my self-bloodied face. It sounded like applause, their faces odd and scared. Later, when all others played games in the gym, I was stuck practicing my fluency, and I have finally had enough. I curled my fist, but my speech therapist patted my hand and said, calm yourself. Remember how lucky you are that you can speak. It had to be one of the first times that year someone touched me in a way that didn't end with a bruise. Her hand, cold and raw with jewelry, sat heavy on mine in silence, reminding me that guilt should rattle around my mouth like a loose tooth. Because I have the privilege of speaking, but I act like I can't so often that at times I really, really think I can't. What else can I say, except I sometimes hated myself for complaining about what speech I have, even though it ghosts me. It felt better God damn it. It felt so much better to take the pain of punches, the numbing acts of giving myself up to my own fist, or even to Brandon Chu the next day as he stamped my face further into the ground. Can you talk now? How about now? How about? Blackbirds crashing, twisting, rising. Every day, something breaks inside of me, and every day it keeps on breaking. Here, the sun's soft shadows burn my tongue when I open my mouth, and the blue-black fog of my stuttering steams out like opening a bathroom door after a hot shower. My voice is built up like that, coming out bit by bit, and then all at once. That's a lie. It's always bit by bit. Interruptions and clapped shut doors can't be stopped. Not in this world. Not from my scarred up larynx. Not from my damaged speech center, or whatever part of me causes a stutter. On days like this, when I'm blaming blackbirds crashing through branches, or the spinning of leaves into my therapist's window, or the hushing shut of office doors for my stuttering, my therapist says, wait, that's not important. What she says, that is. Every sound is an interruption. Everything splits my words. Sometimes my speech therapist tells me when you close your eyes, you feel like you're levitating. When she tells me this, her voice goes all falsetto, then fades into the distancing hum of the AC, the steady beating of the beaded ceiling fan cord. I'm not saying this ends in my own levitation, but I'm not saying it couldn't. Nothing is too much to believe in if you don't expect it to happen instantly. And then this last one is if you accept my silence. I'm still nervous about stuttering in front of you, staring as my half-formed sentences scatter at your feet. Instead, I stuff unsaids fatty and loose like gelatin in a Ziploc tucked in the back of the medicine cabinet, waiting for them to make sense. Every day I pluck more unsaid words. Every day is another I have with you. The dark and the unheard ripen my words, every stunted thought, every syllable strung from my throat. I'll give them to you one day, opening the bag beneath the cold fluorescent light, speaking stored inside. One day, I'll talk all of this out. Thank you.
Well done. All right. Very good. Second reader. Beaumont Rand is from and glad to be back home today in Louisville, Kentucky. Today, he's planning on reading from his graduate thesis, Aces Crazy, Eastern with a post-apocalyptic flair. He wants to thank his family for putting up with him through what is his 9th year overall, and hopefully last, in some form of college. He also wants to thank Pinckney, the rest of the faculty, and particularly the members of his cohort, as getting to know all of them has easily been the best part of the last 3 years. He hopes everyone is doing all right, and hopefully we'll get to see everyone sometime soon. So, Ian, will you spotlight Beaumont Rand for us?
Can you all hear me? We good? There we go. What's up, everybody? So I'm going to read from the middle of my novel, so it's kind of a spoilery part, but you know, it's a good part. All right. This is how I killed Bob Dole Desecrator. The ground suddenly shook, and the monster burst right out from under me, teeth going, knocking the bullet away with its giant, long forehead and a simple tink. I rode on its mane as its long, scorpion-like body, covered in grass-linked brown fur, shot upward. Its 6 legs, ending with a hoof, tail ending with a bristled stinger, pointed at the sky. Bob Dole just stood there, both backing away and staring at the roll of the dice, thinking that it had to be an accident, that all of this had to be some kind of strange coincidence. Then, as it dove back into the ground, I fell from its mane and landed, feet first, on top of Bob Dole Desecrator. I knocked him over and buckled my knees to stay up as the monster landed up high in the bowl and burrowed back in. Then, as Bob Dole tried to get out from under me, I took my boot and stomped on his face. I kept stomping as his rolls and shakes to get free turned into twitches. I shut my hot, watery eyes and smashed his jaw and nose, crunching his skull with my firm heel until he became still. Each stomp carried half of my weight, but I felt like I was thrusting all of it onto him, like I was a hammer driving in a nail. I stomped until I started to feel the crunch of the white dust beneath my boot. Then I looked down at him for the first time since I fell on him. His body was laid out like he had been shot dead, but his face and head were unrecognizable. His face and head was now bloody, pulpy, bone-chunked mush that I was ankle deep in. And his blood was all over me, covering my boots and trousers, dotting and streaking my shirt, vest, arms, and, when I rubbed my hand on it, face. I backed away from him, took a deep breath of the hot, dry, dusty air, and fell back onto my ass. I laid there for a while on the hot white dust. I was waited for relief to come and wash this blood off of me, to give me the jolt I thought I was going to get. But it didn't happen. I knew the monster would eventually come back. So I got up and went over to Crazy Beaumont, who laid face first on the ground. I rolled him over. He had a mouthful of dust and his eyes had rolled to the back of his head. I tried to think of what he hated the most to wake him up from his mother's milk sleep. "Motherfucker," I said. Nothing happened. "We're out of whiskey." Nothing. "Stir at Milton." Still nothing. That gave me a little relief for that moment, though, that I was surely high up on his list. I wasn't the thing he hated the most. But it was only a moment. I didn't know what else to say. I knew nothing else about him. Even he knew nothing else about himself. So I took a deep breath and knelt on the ground beside him. "Don't leave me out here alone," I said, "please." He blinked and his blue eyes were back in the right spot. I helped him back on his feet. His rucksack was hanging by one strap and he was spitting dust. Then he looked down at the thick, chunky red smear topped with a gambler's hat. "God damn," he said. He gave me his handkerchief and was silent as I wiped the blood off my stump and put the hook back on. It cut into my skin. Then I picked up my dice. They were colder than the river in the wintertime. I put them in my vest pocket. I picked up the Aces Crazy and it felt cold too. I handed it to Crazy Beaumont and with a look of disgust, he shoved it in his rucksack. Then, without a word, we dragged Bob Dole's headless body up the bowl until we got far enough from the bottom that we could see the long trail of blood and the white dust tumble up and out of the rim. We looked through Bob Dole's things. For a bounty hunter, he didn't carry much that was worth a lot. A few knives and shivs to open a bottle, a chunk of flint, some spare rounds. His old gun tucked away in his coat, Crazy Beaumont's silver gun in the other pocket. My maps. I snatched them, folded them up tight, and tucked them in my vest. He had some biscuits, one that I broke in half for Crazy and I to share. He didn't take it. I didn't take a bite. We both just sat there listening to the low whistle of the wind blowing across the bowl, kicking up white dust like something was smoldering down there. "Fucked up, Stirrup," Crazy said. "Real bad." "You already said that," I said. "I know," he said. "I thought I ought to say it again." This time it sunk in deeper than anything Bob Dole ever did to me. He was the one who hurt people close to me then. Now it was me doing the hurting. "I'm sorry," I said. "I thought if I killed Bob Dole, maybe it'd make things right. Maybe we'd all get something out of it." "The hell I get out of it," Crazy said. "What about Mary, Dungus? They get anything out of it?" "No," I said, looking at my bloody boots. Part of me thought I had convinced myself that lying to him would just offset him lying to me back in the knobs. And that part of me, I realized, was full of shit. A lie upon a lie didn't make things better. It only made things less true. And the truth I was staring down right now was that none of it was coming back. Not Jack, not my right hand, not nothing. We got quiet again. I reckon we both thought it was time to go, but neither of us wanted to call that shot. "Well," I said something that was true. "We got that red gun." Crazy snorted. He took off his rucksack, grabbed the stock of the Aces Crazy like an axe, and got on his feet. Crazy Beaumont took the Aces Crazy and heaved it as hard as he could to the bottom of the bowl. It landed in the dust and became just a ruby glint. Soon after came a brief rumble, and it sank beneath the ashy ground. "The hell'd you do that?" I asked. You could have used a gun that don't miss. Crazy spat in the dust. If you don't ever miss, you said, then what do you aim for? Thanks.
Outstanding. Well done. All right. Well, moving right along, Jessica Freeman writes poetry and nonfiction. Her most recent work can be found in McNeese Review, the Mississippi Review, Foothill Literary Journal, U City Review, and others. Tonight, she'll read poems from her thesis, Songs for the Father of Waters, which deals with living in Winfield and Foley, Missouri during the great floods of 1993 and 1996, and the effects those floods left on her already fractured family.
Hi, it's so nice to see you guys. I'm going to read two poems. I had a poem that I got in the mail today. I had a poem come out in the McNeese Review, so I'm going to read the one in there and then a different one. This is called Snow Creek. When I found my brother, he was deep in a creek bed where water used to run, cocooned with an empty bottle and talking I love yous to the moon, in inches thick acres of snow that wound down a headless tributary. And I yelled about siblings and crosses and joined flashlight beams to his eyes before I wrestled him into the car. Because I had read Antigone, because night is inexorable, because night is a crowded kind of quiet, because Mom always said love is some blinding bullshit, I drove him back to the halfway house in St. Louis and saw dawn turn helplessness into traffic. My dry tongue yellowed, my brain became lost in a cacophony of a broken morning, lost in the sound of in-between places where my brother lived, drenched in fire. His body was always stuck and craving, and on the drive, all I could think was, in what language is there a verb for love, which also means fire, which also means grayness, which also means we are all barely breathing. And I'm going to read one other one called Portrait of Fear. And what was I so afraid of in Foley, Missouri? Maybe the heavy pulse of owl breath that clung to wind like desire. The birthing cries and screams of possums in cornfields behind me that crept electric and painted the body of a stuttering morning. My father's Vietnam buddies who sat at the vinyl kitchen table, craggy faces broken and weathered as they played pinochle and patted my ass when I walked by. Their cigarette ash coating the sloped kitchen floor of our house. Our house lurching on stilts in summer's steamy wind as I braced myself against trembling walls. The jambrote, a screech of metal galling against rock and rotting wood posts beneath our raised house. A dead deer killed off season swinging from rafters below, ticks dropping down her back as she bled out into dirt and tackle boxes. Death was a promise here, lurking behind urgent summer's beauty. It was a wild horse hard-gating in circles next to the levee behind us, hovering in the burnout car beside me. Death, the stray bullet shells fired from my cousin's guns as they aimlessly shot at rabbits and squirrels, their blood running with roaring laughter and leaching across the wet road. It lived in the conversations we had about tourists who fell from those limestone cliffs we hiked all summer, their bodies sliding down gray scarps, sinking into oiled river water where it seemed nothing we said could stop the river from taking them into the guard fish water. That summer, before the floods came, water rose and ate its own foul, turbid currents. It sucked on the sweat-soaked ear of town at the bait shop as we talked about flood stage and gullies crusting and fattening in the stained smell of old water. It flashed on my warm feet and ankles when I went frog gigging at night. I got used to the gulped feeling, longing to be left out to dry and wondering about the source. Where did this water come from? Certainly it couldn't just be the rain, licking her tongue, slaughtering an already full creek belly. Impossible that the thrum of poison skulking against our sin, filling the bathtub base, was not more than a surge of storm, picking up sand and rock downstream. At night, roiling in the distance across the wet track of Highway 70, their tunes muffled and aging, I heard train whistles, a pierced bouquet punctuating the ranks of the river. Thank you.
Since a lot of us are muted, you can show reactions down in the lower right-hand corner. If you're on a PC, I don't know what it's like on an iPad or a phone. There's a little thing down there that says reactions, and you can applaud that way. You can give a thumbs up, and so on and so forth. And that's since we're kind of prevented from being able to applaud each other. That's maybe the best that we can do in this venue. So, all right. Next, Will Holcomb, aka O Hybridity, made his first publication in Daily Science Fiction in early 2017. His horror short, wow, his horror short, 8 Missed Calls. That must be one of them. Will, can you get that?
Hi, Gerald.
Okay. His horror short, 8 Missed Calls, was the runner-up for the 2019 Miller Audio Prize for Comedy. Alongside his publications and works of fiction and development, he has authored and self-published several works in the realm of tabletop gaming, including material for the Melsonian Arts Council Troika, the Highland Paranormal Society's Tunnel Goons, and his personal bestiary, Teratoscope. As a member of the San Gennaro Co-op, Will has consulted on creature design for the upcoming game Brinkwood, The Blood of Tyrants. In addition, Will edits and helps to localize light novels for Seven Seas Entertainment, Toradora and Kuma 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 Bear. The 2 major series in his portfolio can be found at any major book retailer. He plans to expand this list by several orders of magnitude.
All right. Hi, everybody. This is the Griffins of Sathya. They huddle against the bitter wind that blows through the gully, downy pinioned hatchlings in the center, surrounded in turn by the steely feathered eldest, and at the outermost ring the honor guard, cream yellow in the limited daylight. It's an early winter in Scythia. In another few years, when a few more kings have slaughtered each other and the Roman vassals settle in, they'll call the country by another name, and the winter will come earlier still, but that's not until later. The shepherdess tightens her scarf, her eyes water from the dust on the gale, and the tears freeze on her ruddy cheeks. The griffins can weather the night, and they would take her into the huddle, but never the horse. And it's a nice horse, foreign stock. Its great-grandfather came from beyond Parthia with 16 others like it in trade for a single mature hen to replenish the old Assyrian line. A good horse, the shepherdess has been taught, was worth more than a decent man to any woman or a mountain of gold to any Roman. So she blows hard on the little tin whistle around her neck, urging the flock forward towards a tributary off the main drag of the gully that she knows will shield them from the wind and an abortive mine that may still stand, not the worst place for a fire, if the griffins can be pushed that long, if the mine hasn't collapsed, if she can keep a fire going in these conditions. There are always a lot of ifs. But the mine is there, and the griffins do follow, though the going is drawn out and full of put-upon shrieking. When they arrive, there is already a fire going, and a stranger at the entrance. He is tall, broad, draped in furs and weather-beaten cloth, though his face is shadowed, his eyes and teeth gleam in the firelight. "It's you," he says. "Holy light of knowing, it's you." It's cramped, all of them in the cave, but the closeness staves off the cold and makes talk flow out of the stranger like water from a hidden spring. The man is a slave, Greek. His scoloti is nearly unintelligible, and punctuated with invocations of powers whose names the shepherdess does not recognize, but he at least tries to make himself understood to her in her own tongue, which she smiles about before asking him to clarify in Greek. "I have looked for you a long time," he says. "Not for you at first, of course, just for a griffin." She asks why, though she suspects she knows the answer, and dreads what will come when she tells this man no. Her hand comes to rest on the corded hilt of her long knife. Killing for the flock is her duty, and it comes easier now than it used to, but not easily enough. The Greek's face is downcast now, his dark, heavy brows furrow. He, too, has expected the possibility that there would be nothing to return with. He believed the griffins were extinct until mere minutes ago, if not imaginary. "My master's son goes to war in the spring," he says. He knows a story from his own time as a soldier, something he heard in Persia. A hero of theirs was born feeble, but a griffin, in sympathy, came to roost in his window and opened its breast. It nursed him on its heart's blood, which gave him unyielding courage and a mighty arm. "Well," she says, "maybe in Persia, but not here." She gestures to her flock. The honor guard are the size of well-fed rams. Their feathers are golden in the firelight. They are wingless. This the Greek is prepared for. All along his journey, he'd scoured every library and every private set of scrolls he could afford to, and found record the griffins of India did not fly, but rather paddled through the air on fan-like foreclaws. But the griffins of Sathya are squat and unacrobatic, little more than crested, brilliant-feathered, parrot-beaked sheep. These, he thinks, are the great defenders of the gold reefs. He watches as a patchy-coated brood hen shuffles from one side to the other, then shits prodigiously where it stands. Its eyelids flutter. The droppings are pale and loose, shot through with clots of dark purple. He rankles at its sickly sweet stench. "Maybe in Persia," he says, "but not for me, not in my lifetime." He scratches at his prodigious beard, then takes up a loose stone and hurls it out into the gully. "I would have been a free man," he says. The shepherdess has seen the slump in his back and the flat dark in his eyes before in brothers, uncles, sisters, cousins, enslaved or wed to Rome. She does not work alone by choice. "Do you know why no one minds here anymore?" she says. "Because it's too hot in the day, too cold at night, too dry all day, and every third person you meet will rob you blind?" said the Greek. "I don't know why anyone comes here except to be somewhere else as fast as possible." She snatches a brand from the fire and takes him by the hand. It's huge and calloused. His ring finger is missing from the first knuckle down, and the stump is mottled and uneven from a protracted healing. "There's gold here," she says. "My ancestors mined it until we found its guardians." The flock parts around the two of them as she leads him back into the back of the shaft. He works hard to match her steps. The deeper they go, the more treacherous the path becomes, but she picks across it with a goat's precision. Holding the brand high, she guides his eye to the glittering ceiling, more gold than he's ever seen in one place. Then she points to where the tunnel ends, and the great skulls. One horned, beaked, with a crest as broad as a hoplite's shield. Another with a mouthful of knife-like fangs, both nearly as large as a full-grown man. "There were great griffins once," says the shepherdess. "Their bones are everywhere. Too mighty and brave for their own good, I think." "Cyclops," says the Greek. "Cyclops," he goes on. "Giants. In Crete, as a boy, I saw their bones. Great tusks and one socket in the middle of the face, and arms and legs as big around as tree trunks. They're all dead, too." She looks him in the eye. "Maybe not dead," she says. She cups the tip of the beaked skull's horn in one hand. "Just changed. For all I know, you might be kin to your Cyclops as my flock is to this." "Me? You're big by my measure, but not a monster." "No," she says, "not anymore." They stand in silence in the place where the mine died, just for a while, and when they decide to return to the flock, the horse, and the fire, they do it in silence still. The Greek does not return to his master. Scythia is vast and cold, and no one wants to stay long, even when it does become part of Rome for a time. The shepherdess lives a long time, and her family is never quite as large again, but it grows. The Griffins of Sathya still thrive. They are well-minded and safely beneath everyone's notice.
Okay. Mandy Jordan graduated summa cum laude from SIUC with a BA in creative writing and a minor in classics. She's published 5 novels and 2 short story collections, and her stories have appeared or are forthcoming in the Missouri Review, Switchblade Tech Noir, Pulp Modern, and many others, totaling over 100 publications. She is the founder and co-editor of Alcyone, Speculative Fiction and Poetry. Mandy won the Missouri Review's Miller Audio Prize for Prose in 2019 with her short fiction piece Inheritance, and the Shadows of the Mind podcast, based on her novel series, is available on all major listening platforms. She is currently a Master's Fellow at SIUC, and she will graduate this year with her MFA in Fiction.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody. It's been a while. This is a scene from my thesis novel, The Sanctities of Light, which is a space opera. I'm actually currently dressed as the protagonist. I sewed this costume. And the only context that you should need for the scene is that the group is escaping a planet that's about to be destroyed. Outside, enormous black spires were lit by gray gems on all sides, flowing together to break the darkness. As I watched, the spires detached from the ground they had been rooted to and began to rise through the night air, one after the other, totaling what I estimated to be several hundred just within my line of vision. Like beacons leading the way, they shot upward, lifting countless passengers off Bacora's surface. I caught my breath. Suddenly, a small round object fell from the sky, ablaze and approaching at an increasingly rapid pace. It crashed into the chaosogen-covered ground, igniting a rippling explosion that scattered the Bacoran stragglers still lingering outside. Cadmus, I called. No sooner had the impact been made than a wave of similar objects appeared in the air above the planet, cascading in a shower of fire and rock. Meteors. I watched as one impacted the nearest spire, blowing a hole through its center. Its red crystal lights flashed now in warning, and the ship began to plummet back toward Bacora. I heard gasps from behind me. I could sense that Cadmus and the others had gathered to watch what was happening outside. The spire exploded on contact with the ground, sending shards hurtling toward the people still rushing toward their places. All around the first ship, meteors slammed into the spires, evacuating the Corans. Many of the vessels were spared, having sustained only minimal damage. Some, however, met the same end as the first. "We need to get out of here," said Cadmus, "now, while we still can." As one, our group turned from the catastrophe outside and began to sprint through the halls. Eventually, we reached what looked like an observation deck. The floor extended at the front edge into something resembling a balcony with an enormous red window enclosing the space and a handrail following its curve. Numerous officers were scattered through the room, which looked like the bridge of a warship. The officers looked as terrified as I was. We moved to the edge of the deck and stared out the window. Across the landscape, spires and ships of all sizes fell to the ground. Telepathic cries for help echoed through my mind and were silenced. The floor trembled beneath my feet. I watched the ground slowly fall away outside the window as the palace lifted off the planet's surface. My pulse accelerated, and I laid my hand on the nearest part of the railing, determined not to let anyone see how uneasy this made me. I'd never seen something this large attempt to fly, and I had no idea how it was going to. The building lurched. Lights flickered around us, and I looked from one face to the next, but found no answer. "Keep calm, everyone," Cadmus instructed. There was panic in his eyes. The palace pitched to the side as another meteorite impacted it. A glance outside told me that our altitude was nowhere near high enough to exit the atmosphere. "Can't we go any faster?" I asked. "No," said Cadmus, "not if we want the whole thing to remain together." A small pause followed, and then a terrible booming sound echoed through the room as, through the immense crystal pane, I watched one of the meteors crash into the room directly below us. Despite the floor separating us from the impact, the walls quaked, and the roar of air flooding through the newly made hole was deafening. The palace seemed to freeze in midair. Then, with the emergence of a sickening, fluttering feeling in my stomach, I realized we were falling. "It must have hit the engines. What do we do?" shouted Callum. Cadmus was shaking his head in disbelief. "This can't be happening. We're running out of time." We fell upward, pressed tightly to the ceiling by the speed of our descent. I knew that if there was a moment to prove the protector had been correct in selecting me to lead, it was now. I had to do something, had to fight for our lives and those of everyone the 8 of us were supposed to protect. I swallowed hard and focused on returning to the floor. calling on every bit of strength that I possessed. I mentally guided myself downward, and when my feet touched the ground, I bent into a crouch. I closed my eyes and focused all my energy on the palace and on stopping its rapid descent. I pulled upward with my mind, and screaming insurmountable pain splintered through my head. I knew I was straining my mind to the point of breaking. My skull felt as though it would crack into pieces, and I couldn't hold back a cry, though it was lost in the rush of air as we fell. A horrible few moments passed in which I was certain that my efforts would have no effect. Then our descent slowed. My head throbbed so severely that my vision faded in and out, and I didn't know how much more I could stand. Suddenly, I felt my load lighten. I forced my eyes open to see that Cadmus had joined me on the floor. He knelt beside me, helping me. Our combined efforts were, after what felt like cycles, successful. At once, the stress was wiped away as the palace's emergency thrusters engaged. Gravity was restored, and the others guided themselves to the ground. I collapsed, spots obscuring my vision as the room spun sickeningly. "Are you all right?" I recognized Cadmus's voice, though I lacked the strength to look up at him. I needed to find a way to respond. I had to tell him yes, though my body screamed the opposite. My head felt like it might split into two at any moment, and my vision was blurred and inconsistent. But I couldn't tell him that. I couldn't look weak now. Thank you.
All right. Mary Ardery is from Bloomington, Indiana. Her work most recently appears or is forthcoming in Fairy Tale Review, Missouri Review's Poem of the Week, Story South, and Prairie Schooner. She will be reading from her thesis, They're Not Lying When They Tell You You'll Dream of the Dead, poetry about her time working as a wilderness field guide for a substance abuse program in North Carolina.
All right, thanks, Pinkney. I will be reading 3 poems. Is this what people mean? I see my dead around town, at a cafe breaking a hot scone in half to let the steam rise, or sometimes waiting at the bus stop I drive by each morning. We must commute in opposite directions. It's been years since I worked direct care, and still every day I Google the progress of class action lawsuits against Big Pharma. On my drive home, when an old top 40 song comes on the radio, one that reminds me of those week-long shifts, I change the station. But some days, if I have time and I'm alone, I turn down a rural road and turn up the volume. It feels right to remember their voices, singing along to pop songs in the van as I drove us into town for an NA meeting or 3 hours on those hauls to the woods. Is this what people mean when they say time is not linear? That if you pull to the side of a quiet road and close your eyes, you can hear your past, the dead singing. You can feel someone tap your shoulder, her breath on your neck when she leans in to ask, how much longer till we get where we're going? Kawana campsite. All day it had poured, but finally the rain slowed to drops leaking through the ember-pierced tarp. Balaclavas and spare socks spilled from packs like woolen intestines. I stayed awake longer in case the woman still detoxing couldn't sleep and came looking for me. On a fire-ring rock, someone's orange plastic spoon began to melt, but then the flames burned down. They sank to silvery husks of branches that gave way to ash with a slight prod, the molten surface of some distant planet. So much of my time in the woods, I remember as life in another world, lonely. But that night, as the rain let up, I felt at home beneath the tarp, keeping vigil with wild animals. An owl called out of the dark, and the embers pulsed like living jewels. Red, black, red, still breathing. Snowed in at base camp on Valentine's Day. The group trudged up the cabin's driveway and along the winding rural road. No roses would be delivered, no chocolate truffles or ruby earrings, but we had plans to bake cookies after our walk. The brightness needled our eyes. The white went on, smooth and untouched like the skin of a baby. Each time someone threw a snowball, it landed with a soft thunk against a puffy coat, bright red, facility issued. The newest woman made a half-hearted throw at no one. She asked if tomorrow she could call her little boy, who was staying with her sister until she got home. I explained policy, but promised she could send a card. Someone overheard and shouted, "Don't worry, you'll learn to love mail." And quietly, as if confessing, she told me she knew this area. Sirens had screamed on these roads 3 times for her alone, the EMTs rushing to shock her heart back into its routine. It's hard, she said, being this close to home. Silently, she and I retraced the boot prints we'd bruised into the cold, colorless road. The group's laughter echoed around the holler amidst the thunk of snowballs and the crunch of our footsteps. Outside the cabin, we stood together and watched the others make snow angels, each woman working to leave some version of herself behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian Mackel has spent his MFA working on a project called Under Procedure, an exploration of mental health. Not that it matters, because he's too depressed and distractible to finish it. He spends his days with his cat Natty and also crying to God, "I did not ask to be born unfit." And then he considers, naked and sweating, that God did not ask for him either. Ian is not wearing pants because you won't see the bottom half of his screen. Ian, and that's the case with most of us, I suppose. Ian Mackel has been published nowhere. He graduated summa cum laude in nothing.
For fucking posterity or whatever, because I won't feel like this forever, I know, but just in case I need to remember, I feel so sick, like actually, like sick, and I don't know, maybe I am just sick, but like I want to just, I don't know, like make myself throw up or something, just so I feel good, because I know I'll feel good.
Try therapy. Try taking your medicine. Try meditation. Try aerobic exercise. Try better sleep hygiene. Try counting sheep. Try mindfully cleaning your apartment. Try listening to the radio and watching TV to make you feel less alone. Try to be a better listener to loved ones. Try binge drinking. Try to stay better informed of world events. Try reading about genocide to make yourself feel better. Try better genes, a different childhood.
I set all these goals for myself, and I can't do any of them. I can't go to bed on time. I can't wake up on time. I can't stop drinking. I can't stop smoking. I just can't do it.
For the average American, your chances of committing suicide today are higher than the chance that you will see a fox sniffing, ambling between the trees. You are more likely to be killed by a drunk driver than you are to reach out to a college friend. You are more likely to be laid off than to be promoted. You will more likely die today than you will save a life. You will spend 60-fold more time staring at a screen than working on your therapy. Being promoted will not save you. Seeing a fox will not save you. This is not your fault.
And I can't work out. I can't. Oh boy, you can't. I know, and that's what's even more embarrassing. Is that I can't. I just don't. And that means that I'm doing something wrong, and obviously I am doing something wrong, and I'm just so sick of it, and I just feel so alone. And I always do this. I just go and go and go until the consequences are pushing up right in my fucking face. I'm just running out of anything. But I can't just say no. I just have to go until the path runs out, and that is not good. I don't know what to do.
If you've ever broke down crying and you're sick and tired of trying, say, hell yeah. Hell yeah. If you've ever felt like dying, felt like 20-story flying, say, what? If you think that you can make it in this sick and tired society, say, if you're ready to admit that society has outrun mankind's ability to evolve, if you're ready to let go of yourself to be something new, if you're ready to kiss your lover on the mouth without resenting their morning breath, if you're ready to forgive yourself for being unfit, if you're ready to be well, give me a There is an answer. There is an answer. There is an answer. Try. There is an answer. Find it at procedurecorp.com.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny.
All right. Sarah Schore has gotten a lot of flack about being from Florida. Today, she is live broadcasting from the farm she stopped writing about because of the incessant bullying.
Okay, cool. Hey, everybody. The Gala, for a long time, I thought when I read my poems and stuff, I'd be in a room looking at all my friends and enemies, but today I'm just looking at myself, which feels like already it's a poem, so I'm just going to read one. I picked this poem because it's the one I want to be remembered for. I think it's the most representative of me, and most of you have heard it before. Also, my sister Gracie is here, and I wish she wasn't. My girlfriend and I met in the women's bathroom of a dogfighting Cineplex. She was reloading an Uzi, drawling on about Hiroshima with all the disinterest of a deposition. Do you know what the Japanese said after the bomb, she asked? That it was war, and they should have expected it. All I want to do is watch her kiss her own mouth in the mirror. That night, we downed shots of mustard gas and bonded over a fear of lobotomies and made love in the crawl space beneath her Hummer, which is a euphemism for oral sex paired with fisting. Here's the thing. I love her. She wears booty shorts with Benghazi emblazoned on the ass. She's itching to waterboard our waiter. She's cruel and glamorous, and where she walks, fluorescent lights shudder like IEDs. She makes me nervous as a hummingbird, as a trigger finger on an unfit sniper. We are not really compatible. I got a weak stomach when she shows me her PowerPoint on Abu Ghraib, and from the cool pillow of the toilet seat as I let loose every Bud Light lime I've had in the last 6 months, as she talks through the door, she says, I don't feel romantically pulled to you. I don't feel like breaking down this door. I lied about having sex. I am lonely, and you should have expected it. And that's it. That's it. Yeah. Very nice.
All right. And if I have the order right, Ian, this is our final reader tonight.
Yes, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't leaving anybody out. Sarah Jilek's work has appeared or is forthcoming in Illinois' Burgeoning Writers, Alcione, Bronzeville, Prime Number magazine, the all-female issue of Switchblade, which was nominated for Best American Mystery Stories 2019, and Tough, where she was nominated for a Derringer Award. She has done voice acting and sound editing for the podcasts Locker 13, Dear Murder Street, Shadows of the Mind, A Night of Another Sort, and Saints and Witches. Her novel, Saint Catastrophe, is forthcoming from SFK.
Okay, Pinkney froze. So I'm just gonna go ahead and go. So I would like to do 2 things. Hopefully that's not too many things. So first I would like to play a trailer for my novel that I made. I've made 5 trailers. This is the 5th, so no one has seen it before. And then I would like to do a very short reading, if that's all right with everybody. So this trailer is a commercial for a virtual cam house that the main character, Beth, makes in the novel, Saint Catastrophe. So this is something you might see on a porn website in this universe. Here we go.
Everyone needs a place to go to get away. A place with the charm and privacy of the country. A place with that downtown excitement. A place with vintage luxury. A place for modern appetites. A historic luxury hotel. uploaded to the cloud, at your fingertips, where you can be anyone you want to be, or where you can finally be yourself. Join us for a drink, for an evening, or for good. Let us get to know the real you, the you that no one else knows. The Exile House, now streaming, because we promise there's nothing we haven't seen.
Okay, so that's the trailer, and I would want to do just a quick reading, but this is very serious literary business, so I want to get rid of these filters. Oops, oh my gosh. Oh my God, my bad, so embarrassing. Oh, Jesus Christ, what's happening? Okay, that's over, thank God. So this scene takes place after a shootout at the Exile House, that hotel that Beth makes. And Beth gets arrested. And she's on her way to jail. She's on drugs, obviously. And she thinks about her grandfather, whom as a child she witnessed getting arrested for the murder of her grandmother. I wonder, did Grandpa feel this way as the state trooper gently palmed the top of his head and eased him into the back seat of the cruiser? Did he drink in the flashing blue and red until his eyeballs ached? Did a seed of unwarranted joy germinate in his chest as the smooth vinyl warmed to his thighs? Did he wonder what had been hosed from the seat? All the tainted blood, the meth sweat and the ordinary sweat, the saliva webbed between strangers' fingers or his own fingers, and smeared in globs on the mesh cage behind which the officer drove, one hand on the wheel? And the officer himself, did he smell inexplicably of canned peach syrup like this one? That seed of joy, did it sprout its tendrils up the trellis of Grandpa's ribcage as the officer glided the cruiser through the town of his birth, past the carniceria and its thick links of blood-red chorizo strung up on the window, past the Egyptian theater and its twin pharaoh pillars, their blue eyeshadow iridescent in the light, past the hairdresser on Augusta, where the ladies popped their gum and flipped through old issues of Vogue in front of the spotless window? Joy, because it reminded him of being a child, of sitting in the back seat while his father drove him where he needed to go.